In 1991, America built a supercar that looked like it had escaped from a military hangar with license plates. Road and track tested it at 0 to 60 in 4.2 seconds. The quarter mile came in 12 flat. And on paper, with third gear, red line, and tire growth, the math pointed at 218 miles an hour. Not verified, not official, but dangerous enough to make Ferrari, Porsche, and Lamborghini look over their shoulders. It was called the Vector W8, a twin-turbo, aerospace-obsessed American wedge of insanity, built in Wilmington, California, by a man named Gerald W. Wiegert. But the craziest thing about the Vector was not the speed. It was not the Kevlar. It was not the cockpit full of aircraft-style displays and switches. It was this. The car did not get killed by Ferrari. It did not get killed by Lamborghini. It got taken apart by money, boardroom politics, Indonesian power, and a company that would soon own Lamborghini itself. And somehow, the car survived longer than the empire that tried to replace it. Because Gerald W. Wiegert was not trying to build America's answer to the Corvette. That would have been too small. He was trying to build something stranger, something colder, something that felt less like Detroit and more like a fighter pilot's bad decision after midnight. He called the company Vector Aeromotive. Not Vector Motors, not Vector Cars, Vector Aeromotive. Because in his mind, this was not supposed to be a car company. It was supposed to be an aerospace company that accidentally sold something with turn signals. The Vector W8 was the result of that obsession. The body used carbon fiber, Kevlar, and fiberglass. The structure used aluminum honeycomb, bonded panels, rivets, and a frame designed around strength instead of tradition. The cockpit did not feel like a luxury car. It felt like a weapons system. Digital displays, switches, boost controls. A windshield view over a nose so low it looked like it was trying to cut the road open. And behind the driver sat the real argument. A twin-turbo, 6.0-liter V8. Officially, about 625 horsepower. Unofficially, with the boost turned up, Vector claimed the engine could make far more. And that was the magic of the W8. It lived in the space between test data and bar fight. The numbers were real enough to scare people. But the legend was bigger than the numbers. Road and track drove it and got 0 to 60 in 4.2 seconds. Car and driver had a rougher experience because development cars broke down before they could finish a full test. So the Vector became two stories at once. To believers, it was proof that America could out-engineer Italy. To skeptics, it was too wild, too unfinished. Too much promise in a body full of rivets. And then Andre Agassi bought one. A tennis superstar, a world-famous name. A man with enough money to buy whatever he wanted. He got his Vector, drove it, and returned it after complaints that heat from the exhaust had scorched the carpet behind the seats. Vector said he had taken delivery too early, against their warning. The magazines loved the mess. But Wiegert did not see disaster. He saw attention. He had press. He had orders. He had a car that nobody could ignore. But one impossible car does not make a company. The next one needed money. And that is where the story stops being about horsepower and starts being about control. The next Vector was supposed to be the WX3. Lower, meaner, more advanced. The kind of car that says, I know the W8 was crazy, but that was just the warm-up. But prototypes do not become production cars on swagger. They need cash. Factories need cash. Suppliers need cash. Crash testing needs cash. And if you are trying to build an American supercar by hand, cash disappears faster than rear tires. So Vector became a public company. That gave W. Wiegert oxygen. But oxygen can feed a fire. It can also feed whoever is trying to burn your house down. Because when a founder takes outside money, the dream gets a cap table. And once the dream gets a cap table, the dream gets votes. And once the dream gets votes, the founder can wake up one morning and discover he no longer controls the thing with his name, his fingerprints, and his life buried inside it. By 1993, Indonesian-backed investors had serious influence inside Vector. The board said Wiegert was out. Wiegert said it was a hostile takeover. And then the story got ugly in a way only the car business can get ugly. Not with a press release, with guards, locks, lawyers, and a factory full of unfinished supercars. New management said he had been fired. Wiegert said they were trying to take the company out from under him. For a few days, Vector stopped being a supercar manufacturer and became a Western with accountants, armed guards, court filings, competing claims to the same factory, the same tooling, the same prototypes, the same future. And here is the brutal part. Both sides could point to paperwork. The board had votes. Wiegert had the vision. The board had investors. Wiegert had the car. And the man who built the American supercar had not been beaten on the road. He had been beaten in the place where engineers are most vulnerable. A room full of people counting shares. Then the story got even stranger, because the investor web around Vector connected with one name that made the whole thing feel impossible: Lamborghini. In 1994, Megatech bought Lamborghini from Chrysler. That sentence sounds like it belongs in a movie that got rejected for being too unrealistic. Megatech was tied to Tommy Suharto, the son of Indonesia's dictator. And now, through offshore money and exotic car ambition, one power structure had influence over two completely different dreams. Lamborghini in Italy, Vector in America. One was old world drama. The other was aerospace rebellion. This could have been the greatest supercar rivalry under one roof. But that is not what happened. Instead of letting Wiegert's WX3 become the next true Vector, the next production Vector became the M12. And the M12 was not a W8 evolution. It was built around Lamborghini Diablo hardware. A Lamborghini V12, a modified Diablo-based chassis, a Vector badge on the nose. Now mechanically, that sounds glamorous. A Diablo heart is not exactly a lawnmower engine, but emotionally, it was devastating. Because the W8 had been a thesis, the M12 felt like a compromise wearing someone else's signature. The W8 said America can out-engineer Italy. The M12 said, what if we borrowed Italy and called it America? That is why Vector loyalists hated it. Not because a Lamborghini V12 is bad, because it answered the wrong question. Gerald W. Wiegert had spent 2 decades trying to prove America could build its own exotic on its own terms. And the company that carried his dream forward did it by putting Vector clothes on Lamborghini bones. Only a tiny number were built. The press was not kind. The old magic was gone. The W8 felt like a classified aircraft program that leaked into a dealership. The M12 felt like evidence in a corporate custody battle. While Vector changed hands, Wiegert kept fighting. Lawsuits, claims, counterclaims, designs, tooling, prototypes, rights, property. Years of legal combat over what Vector was, who owned it, and whether the founder could ever put the name back together again. But the car world did not wait. The McLaren F1 arrived. The Diablo evolved. Ferrari moved on. The world that had once stared at the W8 started chasing new legends. And W. Wiegert was left trying to rescue an American future from a past locked in court files. Then the story took one more dark turn. Tommy Suharto eventually faced a courtroom of his own, not over Vector. Something much worse. In 2002, he was convicted in Indonesia for arranging the murder of a Supreme Court justice who had ruled against him. A supercar story had brushed up against dictatorship, corruption, and violence. And somehow, sitting in the middle of all that, was a low, wide, twin-turbo American car with digital gauges and a body full of rivets. Gerald W. Wiegert did not get a clean Hollywood ending. He kept designing, kept suing, kept insisting Vector was not dead. He showed another concept years later. He gave interviews. He carried the same wound for decades. And then there was chassis 017, the personal W8 he claimed as his own. A car tied up in the long aftermath of the takeover. Not a factory, not a brand, not a billion-dollar company. One car, one black wedge of unfinished business. In January of 2021, Gerald W. Wiegert died at 76. The full myth was never repaired while he was alive. But the car still exists. The rivets still hold. The shape still looks illegal. And 30 years later, people are still arguing about whether Gerald W. Wiegert was crazy, which is usually what they say right before history admits somebody was early.